It was only then that he realized that she wasn't alone. Lying underneath her was a decrepit old man, his hands and feet twitching with spasmodic violence, as if strapped into an electric chair to have 2,000 volts driven down into his brain. That's when he saw the blood, spreading out over the bed's white satin sheets like an expanding pool of shimmering paint. Following it back to its source, he saw a knife embedded in the man's birdcage-like chest, so deep that only its hilt remained. As the woman's undulations reached a climactic crescendo, he watched in hedonistic reverence as she prized it out to plunge back in, again and again, launching fresh spurts of blood into her sadistically grinning face. Only when the decrepit man's limbs had become still did she lever it out, lifting it to her mouth to begin licking the blood from its glistening blade. With her eyes now fixed firmly on his, he watched her unstraddle the now flaccid corpse to skirt around the bed, turning the knife in her hand to taste the blood from its other side.
"Hello, darling,"
she eventually said, running the blade down her neck towards her heaving, voluminous breasts.
"Would you like to play?"
Tunk felt his heart leap hard in his throat.
"I only wanted to watch," came his jittering reply.
"This isn't Freeview, darling,"
the woman continued, slinking ever closer.
"If you want to stay, you have to play."
Tunk began edging his way slowly back.
"Then I'll leave."
"But, darling, there's nowhere for you to go."
When the heel of his foot caught up against something solid behind him, a panicked glance over his shoulder told him what he somehow already knew. The object he'd backed into was the door to his cell, which meant that the woman was right. There was nowhere for him to go. With his heart thumping inside his chest, he turned back to find her standing directly in front of him, the sharpened edge of her knife pressed firmly against his throat.
"Are you ready?"
he heard her ask, her soft warm lips brushing gently against his.
"No, wait, stop. It's not my time."
"It is your time,"
the woman continued, the words whispered softly into his ear.
"It has been since the moment you killed me."
Feeling the blade open up his throat, Tunk woke with a start.
"Jesus Christ,"
he gasped, reaching for his neck. Breathing hard against the stale surrounding air, he pushed himself up to find himself lying on his bed, his eyes darting into the corners of his shadow-filled cell. He'd had dreams like that before, but nothing quite so real. As he attempted to rub out the images that seemed to have burnt themselves into the backs of his retinas, he rested his shaved, anvil-shaped head against his pillow. After another furtive glance around his cell, he focused his mind on slowing his still pounding heart.
"One more night,"
he whispered again to himself, pulling the covers up over his barrel-like chest.
"Just one more night,"
he repeated, closing his eyes to feel himself begin slipping down into what he prayed would be a deep, dreamless sleep. Chapter 1. Monday the 25th of April. Arriving at Wroxham Police Station half an hour later than he should have, John Tanner stood just beyond the main office doors to stare vacantly about, looking for someone to apologize to. It took him a full second to remember that there wasn't anyone. Nor would there be. By that time, he'd been Norfolk's Detective Chief Inspector for a little over 1 month, making him the most senior-ranking police officer there. But having spent the previous 20-something years in the force, during which time he'd had to ask permission before doing just about anything, he was still struggling to come to terms with the fact that he was finally in a position where he could do pretty much what he wanted, within reason, of course, without having to ask anyone beforehand. He certainly didn't need to find someone to apologize to for being a little late. Allowing a smile to play briefly over his lips, he tugged off his old sailing jacket, still dripping from the rain outside, to amble over to what used to be Forrester's old office, but was now his, and the luxury coffee percolator he'd had installed in its corner on his very first day. Reaching the door, he heard Vicky Gilbert's all-too-familiar voice calling out to him from behind.